Hey guys, today I'm going to be reading some stories from the Reddit thread called What is a Scary Story You Know That Is True? If you guys enjoy these stories and you want me to keep making them, please subscribe and leave the thumbs up. Thank you. In the 1930s near my hometown, a man killed his wife. His mother-in-law and his 3 stepchildren dismembered their bodies and hid them in a root cellar. My great-uncle and his father, my great-grandpa, were out hunting when their dog ran off barking. Uncle followed the dog and found a burlap bag. He opened it and found the head of one of the children. When he told us the story, he said he looked up, and the man was standing right in front of him, another burlap bag in his hands. His dad arrived, scared the guy away. They reported the head to the local cops, who found the rest of the victims and arrested the killer, who was executed, hanged, a couple months later. My uncle only told us the story once, but after he died, we found all the newspaper clippings about the murders in a trunk under his bed. I think it must have haunted him in his entire life, especially since one of the kids was his age. It's a bit of a local history I grew up hearing about, but didn't realize my great-uncle was the one who found the bodies until I was a teenager, because he simply never talked about it except that one time. Back in the 90s, a couple kids went missing. About 4 to 5 days later, my dad was fishing one night. Thought he heard a gator. He got his big Q-beam spotlight and pointed it towards the noise. It was a bloated dead body bobbing up and down in the water, eyes open and facing my dad. It turns out the kids had driven into the water by mistake. They'd probably been drinking. They found the other body a few hours later after my dad called it in. My dad was so traumatized that he never went fishing again and honestly didn't fish much at all after that. There was this guy who kept noticing little things around his apartment that felt off. But one night, he set up a hidden camera just to prove to himself he wasn't going crazy. When he checked the footage the next day, he saw this woman, an actual stranger, crawling out of a crawl space in a ceiling in the middle of the night. She'd been living up there for months, sneaking down when he was asleep or at work to eat and use his stuff. I just read a story on Reddit recently about a couple in Spain who were wondering why there was a wash basin full of soapy water in their kitchen sink. Thinking one of them was sleepwalking, they asked Redditors, and one guy said someone must be using it to wash themselves. They looked, and they found a mattress in the attic, I think, but the trespasser was never found. This happened 3 months ago, but a friend of mine bought a small house in a housing complex at the start of the year. She often heard her neighbor and his girlfriend arguing loudly, as did the other homes around them. One afternoon, she comes home from work to police and an ambulance in her cul-de-sac. She comes to find out that this neighbor had murdered his girlfriend. She tells the police she still heard them yelling 2 days prior. However, when the investigator came to officially interview her, he told her that the girlfriend had advanced decomposition to the extent that they couldn't get fingerprints from her. Keep in mind this was in winter time, which means he had been yelling at a corpse for a while. Scary part is, the police still didn't arrest him and he lived in the house until the girlfriend's brother evicted him since the home was in her name. My great aunt woke up to her dog growling in the middle of the night. When she checked the window, a man in a ski mask was standing there and said, "Party time." She screamed she had a gun, and her dog went crazy barking until he ran off. She bought a gun after that. I can't even think about what would have happened to her if she didn't have a dog to warn her. There was this super eerie case in Lebanon involving a family of weirdos from a village called Farshima. Neighbors had been whispering about them for years due to their reclusiveness and antisocial behavior. But it wasn't until last summer that the authorities broke into their property and found 5 dead bodies in different states of decay in a hidden locked room under the house. Turns out the eldest son had been quietly stashing his own deceased siblings and father down there since the 1980s, claiming it was a family ritual and that he was just fulfilling their wish to be buried at home. While some died of natural causes, one brother, George Al-Fatah, had been killed by another sibling, Khalil, during the Lebanese Civil War. Khalil took his own life in 2000, and a baby girl named Marie died at 1 year old for reasons that remain unknown, but it's rumored that one of the brothers had killed her out of jealousy. The eldest brother, Cristo Alfata was living there with his senile 90-year-old mother. He was arrested, the mother was sent to an elderly care facility, and then the bodies were finally given a proper burial. Such a creepy family, and the story was absolute nightmare fuel when it broke out. Back in 2006, when my older sister was moving to New York City for work, my parents and I helped apartment hunt for her. My sister found a really nice apartment in a nice locality, which was absolutely perfect on paper. The residents were all working women, the landlady seemed super nice to my sister, and the location and rent were ideal. The only thing left to do was for my parents to meet the landlady and finalize the documents. However, after my mom met the landlady for the first time, she told us that she had a weird feeling about her and asked us to keep apartment hunting, so that's what we did. Anyway, fast forward a year or so, and we find out from the local newspaper that the landlady was into black magic and she had allegedly murdered some of the residents to use as sacrifices for her rituals. I wish I was lying. Till date, it is one of the most terrifying things I've read. In my early 20s, my wife and I had a goal of climbing all of the 14,000-foot peaks in Colorado. We would typically hike up a decent portion of the peak the night before, set up a tent and camp out and summit the next day. We were climbing Creststone Needle in August 2014 and set up camp before the tree line ended. We were in a remote wooded area near a creek that was raging pretty good at the time. No other campers around, no hikers seen going up or down, super quiet and peaceful. We cooked dinner over the fire and went to bed early. I woke up around 1 p.m. with the hair standing up on the back of my neck. The only thing I could hear was a creek roaring and the wind blowing. I remember feeling really uneasy, which was unusual because we camped out a lot and were very used to being out in the wilderness. I decided to get up and exit the tent. Immediately upon stepping out of the tent, I saw the outline of a man about 50 yards from our campsite. He was just standing still, staring down at our camp. I yelled up at him, but didn't get a response. I poked my head into the tent to wake my wife up, and when I looked back for the man, he was gone. My wife and I talked about it and agreed that it was probably an early hiker who was starting their summit push early. Both of us felt uneasy, and neither of us were able to get back to sleep. I laid in the tent for about another 45 minutes wide awake. I decided to get back out of the tent to have a look around. I stepped out of the tent and walked around, still feeling a little uneasy. Didn't see anything and still couldn't hear shit. I started going back towards my tent, and when I turned to my left, I saw the guy again. This time he was very close, maybe 20 feet or so from our tent, behind some brush. I yelled at him again and started running his direction. He took off and I lost sight of him. I got my wife out of the tent, we got all of our stuff packed, and we left. The 2-hour walk back to the car in the pitch black was honestly the most terrifying part of it all. About 13 years ago, my sister came home from college for the summer. One day, she got a frantic phone call from one of her roommates. Turns out, these girls were not worried in the slightest about locking the doors to the house. This roommate was taking a shower, got out of the shower, and was drying off when she heard a noise coming from the vent directly above her. She grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight and pointed it up at the vent, and all she managed to see was an eyeball staring at her before she justifiably flipped out and sprinted out of the house in nothing but a towel. She called 911 and the police went into the attic and arrested a homeless man who had literally just been walking around checking for unlocked doors, allegedly. Then it all started to make sense why food was going missing, and the girls assumed someone was lying about taking food. I have zero clue how it was possible that this creature was looking through a vent, but it happened. The Nutty Putty cave tragedy still gives me chills. A guy named John Jones got stuck exploring a narrow section of the cave in Utah in 2009. He was trapped headfirst, wedged so tightly that even rescue teams couldn't free him. He stayed like that for over 24 hours before he died, still talking to rescuers and praying in his final hours. They eventually sealed the cave permanently with his body inside. Knowing he was alive, conscious, and waiting for death in total darkness is one of the scariest, real stories I've ever read. This might make me seem like a weirdo, but fuck it. So in my mid-20s, I started at a new company with a lovely boss lady. She was awesome, and soon feelings developed between the two of us. We started dating, obviously on the down low. She was early 40s, so a pretty good age gap. We dated for about 3 years, and I won't bore you with the details, but things did not work out. I did love her a lot though, and often think she might have been the one, if not for the age difference. I don't know, it might be a rose-colored glasses kind of thing. Anyways, a couple years later, I'm working at a different place, a small family business, not mine, that I funnily enough got with a stunning reference from my ex-lady friend. The business knew my ex because one of their relatives had dated her in high school. Small world. One Saturday night, I'm sitting on my couch feeling sad and lonely and get the great idea to go through my old phone that is kept in a bag in my closet with all the other old tech. I know we all have these that are filled with iPods, iPhones, Blackberries, and 1,000 cables we're too afraid to throw out. So, I plug this phone into my charge and start going through the messages. I stumble across the text chain between me and my ex. I start to reminisce, and sure enough, I find a pic of her in a bra and think, well, that will do for the night. I know, pathetic. Monday morning arrives and I head into work. The office lady comes up to me and was like, "Hey, did you hear about Jessica?" The fake name I'm giving my ex. And I was like, how did she know I was creeping? So I responded dumbly with, "Jessica from my old job who I used to date?" As if she didn't know who we were talking about. She was like, "Yeah, Jessica passed away in her sleep on the weekend. The police found her on a wellness call after she didn't show up for work." I was stunned. I must have been looking at our old text combo either hours before she was going to die or possibly as she lay dead in her bed. I couldn't help myself and told this to the office lady. She told me shivers just ran up her spine. I have no idea why I chose that night after 2 years to go through my old phone and fixate on my ex. It was just something kind of calling me. My mother wanted to sell the old family station wagon back in the mid-1970s. She had a phone call from an interested buyer, but something about him seemed off. She told my dad that she wanted him there when the guy came to look at it. My dad was the one who went with him when he took it out for a test drive. They ended up selling it to him. Turns out later the guy murdered someone and used a station wagon to take the body somewhere. I don't recall if he was a serial killer, but that was a very uncomfortable brush with danger. My mom's intuition might have saved her life. My grandparents lived in Monterey Park, Los Angeles when my mom was a kid. They lived there during the murder sprees committed by Richard Ramirez, aka the Night Stalker. My grandpa was a trucker who often found himself coming home late at night. He would typically crack himself a beer and watch TV at night before going to sleep. The living room was right in front of the front door. My grandpa says that late at night he noticed the door jiggling like someone was trying to break in. He and my family were well aware of his spree at the time, and my grandpa didn't hesitate to grab his mystery Muscatool from the closet, a 12-gauge shotgun, and proceeded to chamber around. Everyone knows the distinct sound of a shotgun being loaded. My grandpa locked and loaded one time and said the jiggling suddenly stopped, and after a while he was able to go to bed. I don't remember if he reported it to the police, but I think he did. It's crazy to think I may not exist had it not been for my grandpa. A few days later, the Night Stalker went after someone in Monterey Park. I know it could have been anyone trying to break in, but I truly think he was targeting my family and thought there were no men at home as there were only daughters and mom, no sons. This happened to me. While I was in college, I was working alone at a retail store in a shopping mall. I had closed shop for the day and I was the only person in the store. I took some stuff to the stock/back room, which also had a small card table with 4 chairs around it for meal breaks. I returned to the front of the store to continue closing up. I was out there for like 10 minutes, then went to the back room to get my coat. When I stepped into the back room, all 4 of the chairs were facing the door in a perfectly straight line, several feet away from where they should be at the table. These fucking chairs had moved and changed directions silently, with no one else there but me. I noped the fuck out, called mall security. They searched the store and found it empty. They said I probably moved the chairs and forgot. I never worked there alone again.